My life has been uniquely challenging due to the dynamics within my family. Growing up, I always felt overshadowed by my younger sister, who was considered the golden child due to circumstances surrounding her birth. She was a miracle baby, surviving a risky pregnancy that subsequently left our mother unable to have more children. This situation intensified my parents' attachment to her, inadvertently positioning me as the less favored sibling. From an early age, I noticed the preferential treatment my sister received. This became glaringly obvious during birthdays and special occasions. For instance, on my 13th birthday, my parents insisted that my sister, who was merely 4 years old at the time, blow out the candles on my birthday cake because she would cry if she didn't. This act, meant to soothe her, detracted from my experience, a pattern that repeated for years to come. My sister even received gifts on my birthdays, while the same courtesy was not extended to me during hers. As we grew older, my parents' decisions increasingly favored my sister's preferences over mine. Family outings, discussions, and even everyday decisions revolved around her desires, often disregarding my interests. I found solace in video games, retreating to my room, which became a sanctuary after I installed a lock to maintain some privacy, a move my parents contested until they realized its necessity. My sister developed a demanding attitude, likely influenced by the constant attention and lack of boundaries in her upbringing. I tried to distance myself, often using my nursing as an escape to avoid the oppressive atmosphere at home. The imbalance in how we were treated led to significant conflicts within our family, culminating in strained relationships and minimal communication. By the time of my high school graduation, the disconnect had grown so deep that despite their outward boasts of pride, my parents remained largely uninformed and uninvolved in my academic life, except during obligatory school meetings. My achievements were overshadowed by the continuous focus on my sister, even during celebrations meant for me, like my 19th birthday, which was held at a child-friendly venue more suited to her tastes than mine. This upbringing has been a profound struggle, affecting my sense of self-worth and family connection. Yet, sharing this story is a step towards healing, acknowledging the challenges and moving forward from them. I hope by telling my tale, I can find some peace and perhaps connect with others who have experienced similar family dynamics. On the day of my 19th birthday, a day meant to be a significant milestone, the celebration fell short of being about me. My name might have been on the cake, but it was undeniably not chosen with my tastes in mind, decorated in pink with white flowers and astonishingly only 10 candles. Worse, it was positioned in front of my sister, setting the stage for what became a breaking point for me. As she prepared to blow out the candles, years of suppressed frustration and resentment surged through me, and I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. Standing there, a 19-year-old amidst my entire family, I broke down. The room fell silent, every eye on me as I let out everything I had bottled up for nearly a decade. The pain of being the overlooked child, the birthdays that felt more hers than mine, it all came out in a rush of raw emotion. After I finished, I needed to escape and walked out to sit by the family car, seeking solitude. Some relatives came out, offering apologies and admitting they hadn't known about the specifics of the pink cake, a detail my parents had kept hidden until the last moment. I explained to them how, over the years, every family gathering seemed to cater to my sister, relegating me to the sidelines. Even today, on what should have been a celebration of my own achievements and transition into adulthood, I was expected to play a supporting role in my own life story. The apologies began pouring in, but they felt hollow. Many admitted they'd assumed I was fine with everything because that's what my parents had portrayed. As I stood there, openly crying once more, my father came out angry, not at the situation, but because my outburst had caused a scene, making my mother upset and ruining what was supposed to be a cheerful occasion. My emotional response only proved to intensify the confrontation. I called out my parents for their unfair treatment, and soon other family members joined in, expressing their own frustrations and disappointment. The altercation spilled back inside the restaurant, leaving me outside with a few supportive relatives like my grandparents who apologized for not seeing the truth sooner. It was a long half hour before my parents reemerged, looking defeated. They offered apologies and a promise to redo the celebration properly, but the gesture was too little, too late. My outburst had laid bare the long-standing issues in our family dynamics, and simply redoing a party couldn't repair the years of neglect. My father tried to defend their actions, but was quickly silenced by the collective disapproval of the family. It was clear now to everyone, including them, that they had made grave mistakes in how they had treated me. They vowed never again to make my birthday about anyone but me, but the trust was already broken. As the confrontation wound down, I couldn't help feeling that any resolution was insufficient. The acknowledgement of their mistakes, while necessary, didn't change the past or heal the deep-seated wounds. I was too overwhelmed to feel any satisfaction from the admissions of guilt or promises for the future. Meanwhile, my sister, unaware and detached from the emotional turmoil, continued to enjoy the festivities meant for me. She even had a tantrum when she wasn't allowed to keep the gifts that were meant for me, including a smartphone she destroyed in her frustration. The day ended with me sitting in my grandparents' minivan, trying to find some peace as the party cleared out. The promises made by my parents and the apologies from other family members were a start, but the path to truly mending our family and healing myself seemed long and uncertain. A few months prior to a pivotal change, I was so overwhelmed by frustration during my birthday celebration that I declared I never wanted to observe it again. My grandparents, sensing my distress, offered solace by letting me stay with them. When I returned home, I found myself unable to speak to my parents. My mother was visibly upset by my silence, and my father matched my reticence. The following weekend, my grandparents coaxed me into joining them for dinner, promising a simple meal out. To my surprise, they had organized a belated birthday and graduation celebration with the entire family, including my parents who seemed eager to mend fences. The venue was decorated with a banner bearing my name and a large chocolate cake adorned with 19 candles. While the gesture was appreciated, it was hard to shake the feeling that a single party couldn't rectify years of favoritism. At this party, my sister's demeanor was sullen. She wasn't the center of attention, and her dissatisfaction was palpable. As I blew out the candles, her frustration culminated in a piercing scream, disrupting the celebration. My parents hurried her out to calm down, only to return with her still visibly upset. Despite the chaos, the family had chipped in to gift me a car, a simple old white Volvo that my grandfather had lovingly restored. I was thrilled with the gift, but my sister's reaction was one of outright jealousy, culminating in another outburst where she demanded a car too. Days later, my sister's envy took a destructive turn. She vandalized the Volvo, smashing windows and cracking the windshield with a hammer, rendering the car undrivable. My parents intervened just in time to prevent further damage, but not before the incident sparked a family uproar. My grandparents, particularly hurt given the effort put into the car, and other relatives criticized my parents for nurturing such entitled behavior in my sister. This event led to significant consequences for my sister. She was grounded for the summer and subsequently sent to boarding school, a decision that was tough on my parents, especially my mother, but deemed necessary to correct her path. My sister found the strict environment of the school challenging, struggling with the rules and the lack of freedom she was accustomed to at home. Meanwhile, my life took a different turn. My grandfather helped me secure a job 40 miles away, which prompted me to move out of my parents' house to avoid the long commute. Finding my first apartment was a challenge, requiring me to navigate financial approvals and secure a credit card. But eventually, I settled into a new studio apartment. Though my parents have attempted to reestablish contact, our conversations have been awkward. My grandfather suggests they might be trying to alleviate their guilt by seeking my forgiveness, but I'm not ready to absolve them. I feel happier and more independent, focusing on my new job and life away from the family drama. Reflecting on these events, I feel a mix of emotions. While there is no delight in seeing my family in turmoil, the current situation is undeniably the result of their actions. This chapter of my life, shared openly here, has been cathartic, helping me process and move forward. Despite some skepticism from readers about the authenticity of my experiences, sharing them has been an important step in my journey to healing and understanding. A few months ago, amid my birthday turmoil, I declared I never wanted to celebrate it again. My grandparents, sensing my distress, let me stay with them that night. When I returned home, I found it impossible to speak to my parents. My mother wept continuously because of my silence, while my father was as tight-lipped as I was. The next weekend, my grandparents lured me to dinner under the guise of a simple evening out, but had arranged a surprise party to make up for the missed celebrations. My parents were there, awkwardly smiling in hopes of reconciliation. They had organized a chocolate cake with 19 candles and a banner with my name for what they called my happy belated birthday and graduation party. Despite this, the past couldn't be undone by one good party. At the event, my sister sat brooding, her displeasure evident since she wasn't the center of attention. She even disrupted the celebration with a scream when I blew out the candles. After a brief exit to calm her down, my parents brought her back, looking more upset than ever. Despite the chaos, I received some significant gifts: a smartphone and a car. The family had pooled together to buy an old white Volvo for $7,100, which my grandfather had tuned up and my grandmother had cleaned thoroughly. Days later, my sister's jealousy manifested destructively. She vandalized the car by smashing its windows. My parents managed to intervene before she could do more damage, but the incident highlighted the ongoing issues. My sister had been spoiled to a degree where she couldn't fathom not getting her way, leading to a massive tantrum that mirrored that of Eric Cartman, a comparison some have made due to her manipulative and bossy nature. In the aftermath, my parents were compelled to send her to boarding school. There, she continued her pattern of manipulative behaviors, from a failed hunger strike to bullying that backfired, leading to her being ostracized. Despite her tactics escalating to dangerous levels, including threatening self-harm for candy, she suffered a serious fall that led to a broken arm and a concussion. This incident finally exhausted the school's patience. Back home, I've been distancing myself, reflecting on everything while settling into a new job and apartment, far from the family drama. I only return home for major holidays, still processing the past and hesitant to forgive. My parents' efforts to amend things seem driven by guilt rather than genuine understanding of their missteps. Living through my family drama has been surreal. Some people might find my experiences hard to believe, but after being contacted by others who face similar or even worse situations, it's clear that such dynamics are not as rare as one might think. Even the scene where my entire family confronted my parents in a restaurant, which may sound exaggerated, is true to the nature of my close-knit family that tends to do everything as a group. This has its downsides, like when group dynamics forced a rowdy, drunk cousin to sober up away from a family event because he was causing a scene. I'm not generally a fan of such group mentalities, but in my case, it served as a turning point. My parents were left speechless and unable to justify their actions, effectively leading to their public acknowledgement of fault. They've since been making efforts to regain my trust, though their motivation seems driven by shame rather than genuine understanding. Many of my relatives who stood by silently during years of my sister blowing out my birthday candles were spurred into action only after my grandfather, a dominant family figure, called them out. Their subsequent financial contributions towards a car for me, a gesture I appreciate, felt tinged with guilt. They pooled together to buy a $7,100 car, which my grandfather tuned up and my grandmother cleaned meticulously. Despite their efforts, I've chosen to maintain some distance, needing space to sort through my feelings and experiences on my own terms. I'll likely not see much of my parents until the major holidays like Thanksgiving or Christmas. My sister's behavior continues to be problematic, not unlike the character Eric Cartman from South Park. She's grown up spoiled, with a diet full of junk food leading to poor health, and she exhibits manipulative and bossy behavior, which cost her many friendships. People have noted her tantrums and entitlement, making comparisons to cartoonish levels of misbehavior. Recently, this situation escalated when my sister tried various tactics to escape boarding school. Her attempts ranged from doing nothing to launching a hunger strike, which barely lasted 5 days. Her behavior prompted strict dietary restrictions after a babysitter warned of serious health risks if her diet didn't change. Yet, she tried to bully other students and ended up being physically confronted, which led to her being shunned. The last straw was when she staged a dramatic scene in the cafeteria, threatening herself with a knife to demand candy and a return home. This dangerous act resulted in her falling and sustaining several injuries. Following this, the school's patience wore thin. Through all this, my parents have struggled with their own guilt and errors in handling the situation. My mother was caught smuggling junk food to my sister at school. leading to significant arguments between my parents. It seems my sister has only slightly adjusted to the realization that she is not the center of the universe, but her behavior remains largely unchanged. After a particularly harrowing incident, my sister's self-harm landed her in a much stricter environment, a mental ward for children, where she was diagnosed with severe narcissism, a condition cultivated from years of our parents' enabling behaviors. She's now in a place where her actions have immediate consequences, and she can't leave unless our parents sign her out. Additionally, she's been placed on a strict regimen that includes continuing her education and adhering to a healthy diet, which, for her, feels like a personal hell. The tension at home escalated when my mother, desperate to take her precious baby out of the ward, attacked my father with a kitchen bottle during an argument, resulting in serious injuries and police involvement. This incident led to my mother's own psychiatric evaluation and commitment. It turns out her extreme behaviors stem from unresolved traumas in her own childhood, details of which remain elusive to me. Meanwhile, talk of divorce has been circulating between my parents, though so far they've only gone as far as sleeping in separate rooms. As for myself, my 22nd birthday recently passed, celebrated with a small party thrown by my grandparents at one of my favorite restaurants. Both of my parents attended, and even my sister was allowed out of the ward for a brief time. Her resentment was palpable. She's lost weight due to the diet restrictions and couldn't hide her bitterness, especially when I received the attention. Unlike previous times, she didn't scream when I blew out my candles, but instead started crying loudly, questioning why repeatedly a tactic I perceive as just another form of manipulation. During the party, she threw a tantrum over not being the center of attention, yelling at her parents and trying to storm out, mimicking my past outbursts, but for her own manipulative ends. My grandfather intervened, sternly advising my parents not to indulge her demands. After the party, she was taken back to the ward amidst screams and protests, having realized her usual tactics were futile. My sister's situation is complex. She's been forced to confront the reality that she's not a princess in her ward, yet she continues to employ manipulation tactics to get what she wants. Recent episodes include threatening self-harm to coerce our parents into complying with her demands, like eating fast food. My father has reported these incidents to the ward, countering my mother's reluctance. Despite being intelligent, with an IQ around 910, my sister often doesn't apply herself unless there's a reward at stake. Her diagnosis of narcissism, compounded with potential pathological lying and self-destructive behavior, keeps her in a controlled environment where she can't manipulate those around her as easily. Living independently, I've learned to manage my finances and responsibilities. It's challenging, but far preferable to the chaos of living with my family. As for my sister being in a long-term ward, some might find it excessive for just narcissism. But given her complex array of behaviors and the potential for additional undisclosed diagnoses, it's likely the safest place for her and others around her. Through sharing these experiences, I've come to understand the dynamics of my family more clearly and recognize the long road ahead for both my sister and the rest of us. Her path to recovery, if it happens, will be long and fraught with challenges. And in the meantime, I am focusing on building my own life away from the turmoil of the past. For a long time, my birthdays felt like they were more for my sister than for me. Gifts often had her name on them, and she was encouraged to blow out my candles. This pattern started subtly, but became overwhelming by my 19th birthday. Looking back, it wasn't just the last 8 years that were overshadowed by my sister, it was closer to 10. My parents finally admitting their fault didn't feel like enough, and despite trying, I'm not sure I can fully forgive them. This year, things escalated further when my sister, now being treated in a ward for children, showed signs of narcissism. My father, when pressed, revealed that while she's too young for an official diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, she exhibits many associated behaviors. There's also a hint of another mental disorder that my mother suffers from, which she won't discuss, but it's serious enough to have contributed to PTSD. During a recent altercation, my mother seriously injured my father, which led to her own psychiatric evaluation. Now, they're considering divorce, though they've not taken any definitive steps beyond sleeping in separate rooms. At my recent 21st birthday, held at a restaurant I love, both of my parents and my sister attended. It was clear that my sister still harbors deep resentment and entitlement regarding my birthdays. Her reaction this time was to break down crying rather than causing a scene. Despite her young age, her behavior patterns, seeing what's mine as also hers, have deep roots, exacerbated by how she's been raised. After another meltdown from her at the party, my grandfather sternly warned my parents against indulging her demands, fearing it would only perpetuate her behavior. The day after, she was taken back to the ward, her tantrums proving ineffective. My father later shared that my sister's therapy is gradually helping, but there's no clear timeline for her release from the ward. Her history of blaming me, along with our parents, and her ongoing jealousy over my independence, like having my own apartment, continue to be issues. As for myself, adjusting to adulthood has been a mixed bag. I've managed my finances and responsibilities reasonably well, but revisiting these family issues, especially through sharing them online, has unexpectedly dredged up old anxieties and stress. My recent interactions on Reddit and the overwhelming support have been heartening yet emotionally taxing. I've even mistaken some details in my haste to share, such as the dates and specifics around my sister's actions and my birthdays. The stress even caused physical symptoms, leading my boss to send me home early one day. I'm now considering seeking support through local groups or counseling, as I'm still processing these experiences on a tight budget. For now, I plan to step back from social media and focus on healing. I'm grateful for the understanding and support from this community, but I need to prioritize my mental health and perhaps take a break from sharing for a while.